Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into the folds of an old myth, one that starts not with a grand war or a mighty hero, but with a talking cow. Yes, a cow. And not just any cow, but a strangely beautiful, suspiciously human-seeming heifer who wandered across ancient landscapes while gods whispered and plotted behind her back. You'll blink in disbelief as marble temples shimmer in the heat and divine egos clash like cymbals. The air smells like laurel and storm clouds, and you can already feel the weight of something ridiculous brewing, because where Zeus goes, chaos follows, and this time it starts with a girl he probably should have left alone. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Drop your city and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing beneath the colonnade of a white marble temple, watching Zeus, the king of the gods, lord of thunder, rain clouds, and extremely poor impulse control. Try not to look suspicious. His beard is well oiled, his toga is perfectly arranged, and he's pretending to admire the architecture. But you know better. You follow his gaze. There, sweeping the marble floor, like she's not the reason the sky is holding its breath, is Io. A priestess of Hera, no less. Tall, serene, draped in linen and incense, she moves like she's part of a ritual because she is. She's vowed to serve Hera in chastity, which makes her exactly the kind of person Zeus absolutely cannot resist. You sigh. The pattern is familiar. Historians still argue whether this specific tale was meant to be a moral warning, a cosmic metaphor, or just ancient soap opera. But right now, what matters is the growing storm of unspoken attraction. And you know who's not going to like this. Hera. She's not here yet. She's off doing goddess things, blessing marriages, inspecting temples, plotting grudges. But her absence only sharpens Zeus's recklessness, and so naturally Zeus begins to flirt. Not directly, of course. That would be too obvious. Instead, he sends omens, sudden breezes, flickers of lightning, peacocks appearing in odd places. And Io, poor girl, grows more unsettled. She prays harder. She doesn't know what's watching her. You can't blame her. When clouds start behaving like house cats, you know divine mischief isn't far off. One particularly humid afternoon, Zeus appears in a form more manageable. Not a thundercloud, not a bull. This time, a handsome young man just passing through. You roll your eyes. Classic move. They speak. It's awkward at first. Io is pious, cautious, aware of the stakes. But Zeus is charming. Dangerously so. He compliments her devotion, her eyes, her broom technique. And then he steps too close. The temple shadows deepen, and that's when it happens. A rumble in the sky, a flicker of divine presence. Hera. You can almost hear her eyebrow raise from across Olympus. Now, ancient Greek sources vary wildly in the details here. In some versions, Zeus kidnaps Io immediately. In others, she runs terrified. But in the version you're witnessing, it's all panic. Zeus, caught red-handed, transforms Io into a cow on the spot. Yes, a cow, a soft, snow-white heifer, with wide, sorrowful eyes, and unfortunately for him, still very much aware of what's going on. She can't speak, but she knows exactly who turned her into livestock. And that's your reality now. You are a cow. The floor feels different beneath your hooves. Your perspective is lower. The world smells more intense. You try to scream, but all that comes out is a dignified moo. Zeus pats your flank like this is fine. Like he didn't just ruin your life in 5 seconds flat. Then he tries to act casual. He zaps away the clouds. He whistles. Hera arrives. Slowly. Elegantly. She doesn't speak at first. Just looks. At Zeus. At you. At Zeus again. And then she smiles. This is historically a terrible sign. She strolls forward, skirts gliding over the marble, and murmurs something like, "What a charming animal." You lower your head, trying to disappear into the floor. "Oh," Zeus replies. "It's new, just got her." "She's lovely," Hera says, petting your ears with unnerving gentleness. "May I have her?" Zeus hesitates. He opens his mouth, closes it, opens it again. You wish someone would zap you with a lightning bolt and end the embarrassment. Of course he says. Of course he says that. Because the alternative is confessing he turned a woman into a cow to hide his affair from his vengeful wife. And no matter how immortal you are, that's a relationship-ending conversation. And so just like that, you, the dignified, divine-adjacent priestess of Hera, become the pet cow of the goddess you once served. Irony so thick it could be buttered and served with olives. You're led away on a golden leash. Hera hums. Zeus pretends to be deeply interested in a nearby olive tree, and somewhere in the distance a peacock shrieks like it already knows what's coming next. You don't remember falling asleep, but now you're awake again, still a cow. Still awkwardly graceful, still processing the fact that your new owner is Hera, Queen of Olympus, and possibly the last person in the cosmos who should be put in charge of your fate right now. She ties your leash to a marble post outside one of her temples, humming like this is just another peaceful morning chore. You try not to tremble. She smiles at you, slow and symmetrical, and somewhere behind that expression, a brain as sharp as obsidian is calculating every possible reason her husband would spontaneously gift her a suspiciously lovely, anxious cow. And you chew grass because that's apparently what your life is now. At first, nothing terrible happens. Hera feeds you clover. She brushes your coat. She even insists the temple girls take you down to the spring and let you drink from silver bowls. You're a pampered heifer, technically, but the way her eyes narrow when she watches you, you know she knows. So it's only a matter of time before she calls in backup. And that's when you meet Argus Panoptes. Argus doesn't blink. Not because he's focused, but because he has 100 eyes. Literally. Sprinkled all over his body, like some divine Rorschach test. It's unclear where exactly mythology decided to position these eyes. Some say all over his head. Others say scattered across his limbs like peacock feathers. But one thing's for sure, you're not going to sneak past him. Argus is your new babysitter, your warden, your permanent cow chaperone. The ancient poets loved Argus. He was considered the ultimate watchman, loyal, tireless, a little unnerving at social gatherings. Historians still argue whether he was meant to symbolize constellations, surveillance, or just the horror of being over-monitored. Whatever the case, you now live under his multi-eyed stare 24 hours a day. He never speaks. He doesn't need to. You get the message loud and clear. Try anything, and I'll notice it in 4 different angles. And so you graze, slowly, resentfully. You plod through temple gardens, pausing every few feet just to remind yourself this isn't a nightmare. Sometimes you moo at passing shepherds, but nobody understands you. Even worse, you're starting to understand cows. The other heifers in the pasture think you're weird but polite. One particularly chatty one has strong opinions about thunder. Then one evening, just as the sun is smearing gold over the hills, hills, you see him Hermes, god of travelers, messenger of Olympus, trickster with a flute and sandals that fly. And on this day, apparently the god assigned to rescue you, he lands lightly on the temple portico, sandals fluttering to a stop. He adjusts his cap, pulls a wooden flute from his robes, and walks right up to Argus like this is all totally normal. You watch stunned as Hermes begins to play. It's soft at first, a low, lilting melody that winds through the courtyard like mist. The notes twist and spiral, pulling on your thoughts like invisible thread. Even Argus, who has literally seen everything, looks puzzled. A few of his eyes close, then a few more. Then half his face is asleep. Hermes keeps playing. It's absurd, beautiful, slightly jazzy if we're honest. You almost feel bad. Argus starts to sway. He drops his staff. A snore escapes one of his elbows, and then Hermes stops playing, draws his sword, and in one clean motion cuts Argus down. You flinch. The world holds its breath. Ancient sources are vague on how many eyes were open when Argus died. But one thing's certain, it wasn't painless. Hermes places a hand on the body, murmurs something soft, maybe a goodbye, maybe an apology, and then gently plucks each of Argus's remaining open eyes. Later, Hera will scatter them across her favorite bird, the peacock, turning the feathers into shimmering eyes forever. You've seen those feathers before. Now you'll never unsee them. Hermes unties your leash and whispers something soothing. You understand only fragments come on Zeus. Sent me, we need to move, but the meaning is clear. Freedom. You bolt. He flits beside you fast, as thought guiding you down switchback trails, over hills past sleeping groves and startled shepherds. At one point you trip in a puddle and land with a squelch that's deeply undignified. Hermes chuckles, but helps you up. And for the first time in days, you breathe something that smells like actual hope. But you know it won't last, because Hera is watching, always, and she doesn't let things go. By morning, you're in the next valley. The sun rises too fast. The grass is cold. And there, hovering just beyond the edge of your vision, is something new. A fly. Not just any fly. This one bites. Hard. Again. You try to shake it off, this maddening little speck with wings, but it's persistent. It bites your flank, then your neck, then just under your ear in that place no hoof can reach. You twist and turn and run in lopsided circles, and still it comes. It's not a normal fly. It's Hera's fly. More precisely, it's a gadfly, a sacred tormentor, sent by a very unsacredly irritated goddess. In other myths, gadflies symbolize divine punishment, especially when they're attached to disobedient cattle and men with overambitious dreams. In your case, it means Hera is done playing nice. You sprint through olive groves, across riverbanks, over jagged rock paths where your cow hooves slip and clack, and your breath steams in great puffs. Hermes. He's long gone. Mission technically accomplished. Now it's just you. A talking cow in deep existential crisis. And the fly, it follows you across entire landscapes. Through forests where satyrs hide and giggle. Past shepherds who drop their crooks in disbelief. One of them tries to milk you, and you moo at him in ancient Doric, "Don't you dare," which only makes him scream louder and run. You don't blame him. Your journey becomes a blur of fleeing and stinging. Every time you pause for breath, the gadfly finds you. Bite, itch, panic, repeat. Somewhere deep down you start to wonder if this is it. Not a priestess, not a queen, just an eternal cow chased across eternity by a vindictive housefly in divine disguise. And the geography reflects it. Ancient texts say you passed over the Ionian Sea, which gets its name from you. Historians still argue whether that's a poetic flourish or legitimate toponymy. But there you are, wading into salt water, crying out in confusion as your hooves leave tracks on future maps. Mountains loom around you. Everything tastes like brine and regret. Then you cross Thrace, where the wind cuts like knives, and local myths are already beginning to form. They say a ghostly cow wandered here once, eyes human with sorrow. You can't confirm or deny. You were too busy being miserable. Further along, you stumble into Illyria, and later Scythia, the lands growing colder and crueler. Every new region you pass invents a story to explain you. A cursed goddess, a sacred beast, a bad omen. You're all of these and none. Just a girl turned cow turned symbol fleeing through terrain that carves itself into history behind your hoof prints. And yet something shifts. After days or weeks or months, who can tell anymore, you begin to change. Not physically, but internally. You start to notice the rhythm of your breath, the way your hooves hit the ground like a drumbeat. You find cleaner rivers. You start choosing your own paths. You may still be running, but you are no longer just reacting. Then one night, under a thin crescent moon, you find yourself standing before the Bosphorus, the narrow strait separating Asia from Europe. You've traveled far, and now you must cross again. You wade in. The waters are cold, biting at your legs. The current pulls. You push forward. And that's when it happens. You begin to weep, not with panic, not with fear, but with this low, ancient grief that rises up from somewhere in your chest and spills out of your cow eyes in hot tears. You're tired, so tired. The gadfly bites your neck again, and you don't even flinch. On the far shore, dawn is rising. Red and gold like it's trying to apologize. You lie down in the reeds. The fly disappears just for now, and everything slows. This is where later poets would say, Io rested on the shores of hope. Sounds poetic, probably invented. But you were there. And what you actually did was collapse from exhaustion and moo softly into the mud. Yet this is also the moment things begin to change, because resting there, half asleep and trembling, you dream again. Not of Olympus, not even of Hera. You dream of a voice calm, deep, echoing in a language older than lightning. It says your name, not cow, not heifer, Io. You lift your head, and then you see him, or rather feel him, chained to a rock on a distant crag, yet somehow speaking directly into your mind, is Prometheus. You blink. The dream stays. The Titan who gave fire to humanity. Punished by Zeus. Tortured daily by an eagle that eats his liver because immortality is weird like that. But in this moment, he's not bitter. He's patient. And he tells you something no one else has. You will not always be a cow. He tells you of a future, of a child you will have, of descendants who will rise to greatness, of a line that leads to Heracles, who will one day free him from his chains. You don't understand all the names, but something in you shifts again. The idea of hope long exiled tiptoes back into your mind. And Prometheus, still bleeding somewhere far away, closes with a whisper, your suffering will shape empires. You open your eyes. The sky has turned lavender. The wind is gentler. And for the first time in an age, the gadfly is gone. The morning stretches over the land like fresh linen. You rise slowly, knees stiff fur, caked with travel. But there's something different now. Not in your body, you're still undeniably bovine, but in the quiet between your thoughts. The dream of Prometheus clings to you like dew, and though the gadfly may return, it no longer defines you. You begin walking, not running, not stumbling, but walking. The path is yours to choose, and the world, though still tinged with divine cruelty, seems a shade less hostile. For now. You cross into Anatolia, where locals scatter at the sight of a talking cow. Some kneel, others throw herbs. One old woman calls you a sacred omen of fertility. Another tries to swat you with a broom. You sidestep her with practiced dignity. A shepherd boy offers you olives. You can't digest them, but it's the thought that counts. And then somewhere along the winding valleys, you start to change again. Not in body, but in voice. It happens unexpectedly. One moment you're chewing grass, the next, you let out a groan that sounds suspiciously like a word. You freeze. So does the bird perched on a fig branch nearby. You try again. Not quite. But it's a start. Over the next few days, you practice. Alone, mostly. Hidden behind trees or pacing along riverbanks. You speak in grunts and broken syllables, testing the edges of your cow tongue. It's awkward, slow. But you are undeniably relearning how to speak. Language begins to come back like a tide, first timid, then inevitable. Meanwhile, your body remains unchanged, still a white heifer, still bearing the scars of Hera's jealousy. But within you, the priestess stirs, and you're not the only one who notices. One afternoon, you find yourself near Mount Caucasus again. There in the distance, a storm gathers not overhead but across the sea, and in its shadow stands Zeus. You haven't seen him in weeks. Months' time is a slippery thing when you're fleeing from divine torment. He doesn't approach at first, just watches you from across a stream. You think you hear guilt crackling behind his eyes. You don't move. Then he does something unexpected. He kneels, and you remember even gods aren't immune to remorse. He speaks softly. His voice is thunder without the noise. He says your name, the real one. Io. And it's not a command. It's a prayer. Now here's the weird thing. In some versions of this myth, Zeus doesn't apologize. He just restores you with a snap of his fingers and moves on to the next disaster. But in your version, this one, you see hesitation, an attempt to make amends. Historians still argue whether this detail was added later, perhaps by poets hoping to humanize Olympus's most notoriously inconsistent deity. Either way, you sense the shift. Zeus raises one hand. His fingers glow faintly. You flinch, but instead of transforming you back, he waits. Say it, he murmurs. You do, Io. And that's when it happens. Your shape shimmers. Your hooves lift from the earth, stretching. Your spine realigns. Your breath catches. And in a flood of golden light, fur becomes skin, and mooing becomes silence. You collapse not from pain, but from sheer relief. You're human again. Naked, yes. Filthy, sunburned, starved, and sore, but undeniably human. Zeus offers a robe. You take it without thanks. He deserves none. But you accept the moment. You don't weep, though the urge bubbles at your throat. Instead, you stand on trembling legs and ask the one question that's been buried beneath all the running, stinging, and mooing. Why? Zeus doesn't answer right away. He sighs, looks away. His silence is less cruel than it used to be. When he finally speaks, it's in riddles, something about fate, prophecy, divine consequences. You stop listening, because at last you are whole, and now you have a decision to make. You could return to Argos, to the temple you once served. But the thought of passing through those columns as a survivor, not a priestess, feels wrong. Instead, you follow the Nile, because it calls to you. Egypt, the place Prometheus spoke of. The land where your suffering will become something larger than itself. You journey south, following the rhythms of river and reed, letting the warm breeze carry you into a new destiny. The people there are different. They wear linen and lapis. They speak in riddles and metaphors, but when they hear your name, Io, they bow. Some call you Isis. Others whisper that you descended from the stars. You don't correct them. Not because it's true necessarily, but because it feels better than that cow Zeus turned into livestock. And for once, nobody sends a fly to bite you when you rest. You become a queen, maybe even a goddess. You marry. You rule. Your name changes, evolves, fractures into myth. But your story remains a story of escape, transformation, endurance. You look up at the stars, sometimes wondering if Argus is watching from somewhere, and you hope he knows you never wanted any of this. But you made it through. The palace smells of lotus and warm oil. Its walls shimmer with painted scenes of gods and kings, stories that feel familiar, though they're told in hieroglyphs now, not Greek. You sit beneath a canopy of woven reeds, listening to servants discuss floods and stars and harvest omens. They call you Lady of the Horizon. You smile politely. You're not sure what it means, but it sounds better than that one from the cow story. This is your life now. You rule gently. You are both outsider and myth, woven into Egyptian politics like golden thread in a linen shroud. You carry the weight of your past in your posture, in the careful cadence of your voice. No one here knows exactly what you've endured, but somehow they all sense it. One scribe bent with age and ink stains tells you a tale you've never heard before. It's about a cow goddess Hathor who cries rivers into the desert and whose tears turn into mankind. You listen without interruption. You nod. And later, alone in your chambers, you whisper, "She ran too." You take long walks along the Nile. At dusk, the air smells like silt and honey. Children wave to you from papyrus boats, unaware of how close you came to vanishing. You wave back, smiling. You don't tell them about Hera or the gadfly or the titan chained in the north. Those stories feel like someone else's dreams now, and yet pieces of that past cling to you. You still flinch at the buzz of insects. You still wake from dreams of lightning and marble columns. But there's peace, too. A strange, layered peace that comes only after surviving something so absurd, it becomes sacred. Historians still argue whether Io became Isis, whether the Greeks folded her story into Egyptian worship, or vice versa. Some claim the Egyptians had their cow goddess first, and Io was simply absorbed into that myth. Others argue the influence went the other way, citing coins and carvings. But to you standing barefoot in the Nile's edge, none of that matters. Because myth, you've learned, isn't about who told it first. It's about who needs it most. And the people here, they need your myth. They need your calm. They need your survival. You become a figure of fertility, motherhood, celestial wisdom. Priests build temples in your honor. Cows are sacred again, this time without humiliation. You oversee festivals where dancers wear horns of gold, and the faithful sing songs in a language you're still learning. And above all, you are never alone again. You give birth to a son. You name him Epiphus. His hair smells like warm milk and cedar. He grabs your fingers with fists that remind you of your former hooves, clumsy, determined, soft. You laugh until you cry. Zeus does not visit. Good. You do not want him here, but his presence lingers in your sun. In the way Epiphus watches clouds like he knows their secrets. In the way he startles at thunder but never cries. Your lineage, Prometheus said, will shape the future. You believe him now. Sometimes you sit beneath the stars and imagine Heracles, the distant descendant, who will shatter chains and move mountains. You think of Prometheus, still suffering, still hoping. You wish you could send him a message, a thank you, maybe a blanket, but instead you send silence, a quiet kind of honor. And now let's talk about Hera. You'd think by now she'd have moved on, taken up knitting, started a celestial book club. But no, you still feel her glare occasionally. Not in person, but in moments. A shattered wine jar, a cracked mirror, a sudden thunderstorm just above your garden. She hasn't forgiven you, not because you did anything wrong, but because you survived the wrong done to you. That's the real sin in Hera's eyes, surviving and thriving. Her jealousy is its own kind of curse. But you carry it lightly now like a shawl in spring. You don't fear her, not anymore, because in the end you won. You escaped Olympus. You escaped its traps, its drama, its relentless ego contests. You found a world that made space for you not just as an accessory to a god's wandering attention span, but as a woman with her own story. And if some still call you the cowgirl of Argos, let them, because they also call you mother of dynasties, daughter of light, queen of the river. And that's not just mythology, that's legacy. It's early morning now, and the Nile is quiet. The wind has not yet stirred the reeds, and the fishermen haven't begun their rhythmic chanting. You're seated beneath a fig tree, sandals off ankles in the river. The silence wraps around you like linen still warm from the sun of yesterday. But your mind, it's elsewhere. Back in the past. Back with Hera. You've tried not to think of her. Truly you have. But somehow her face keeps returning uninvited, slightly smug, beautifully coiffed, and always suspicious. She's become the background radiation of your story, the divine static you can't quite tune out. Because even now, Hera's legacy isn't finished with you. You see it in the offerings that arrive from travelers who've never met you, in the whispers of women passing through your court. Beware jealous gods, they say. Beware the wrath of wives. It becomes a theme, a warning embroidered into lullabies, carved into amulets, sung across borders. You are the cow. She is the consequence. And over time, the myth spreads, not just yours, but Hera's too. She becomes more than a goddess. She becomes the face of suspicion, the patron of vengeance, cloaked in respectability. You don't hate her anymore. How could you? Hate takes energy. You've grown past it. Instead, you begin to understand her. Not approve, not forgive, just understand. Imagine her for a moment, seated on her cold Olympian throne, always watching, always comparing herself to the countless mortal women who've stolen her husband's gaze. She didn't choose this role, not really. She inherited it, just like you inherited the consequences. One day a traveler tells you a story you've never heard. It's from Delphi, where priests say Hera had once tried to raise a child of her own alone, no Zeus involved. The baby Typhon turned monstrous, terrifying, a cosmic disaster. Historians still argue whether this myth was meant to illustrate Hera's power or her inability to create without Zeus. But to you, it says something quieter, that even she was lonely. Maybe jealousy wasn't her flaw, it was her armor. And every punishment she doled out was just another seam in the shell she built around herself. But enough about her. Let's talk about the others, because you're not the only one she targeted. Take Leto, mother of Apollo and Artemis. Hera hounded her across the world, forbidding any land to offer her shelter during childbirth. Leto eventually gave birth on a floating island, which then had to be anchored by gods. You wonder if she ever found a home that didn't drift, or Semele, poor girl, tricked into asking Zeus to reveal his full glory, only to be incinerated by divine lightning. Hera didn't throw the bolt, but she planted the idea. Semele's ashes barely cooled before Zeus plucked the unborn Dionysus from her womb and stitched him into his thigh. A deeply confusing backup plan, but effective. Then there's Callisto, a devoted Artemis follower transformed into a bear after catching Zeus's eye. Hera didn't do it personally, but the air around that tale stinks of her. Callisto ends up a constellation. Sounds lovely until you realize stars don't blink or rest. These women goddesses, mortals, nymphs, they're not just footnotes. They're patterns, fractals of survival in a universe designed to excuse the powerful and punish the entangled. And somehow, through this great cosmic pinball machine of blame and beauty, you survived the full cycle. Cow to queen, priestess to pariah to patron saint of don't get involved with Olympians. You're a quiet legend now. Not flashy, not dramatic, but whispered. That's the best kind, honestly, because whispers travel farther than songs. They sneak into places grand tales can't go, into nursery rhymes, into warning signs carved above doorways, into dreams. And as your story spreads, the image of you as a wide-eyed white heifer fleeing through continents becomes symbolic. Not just of Hera's wrath, but of endurance, persistence, of that strange middle place where you're neither victim nor hero, but a little of both. You walk through your palace gardens now, fingers trailing along the fronds of imported myrtle bushes. You pass by a sculpture, one of you as a cow oddly regal made by an artist who clearly didn't know what a cow looked like. You smile anyway. You've accepted it, all of it, because the real myth isn't what they carved or wrote. It's how you've chosen to carry it, with humor, with gravity, with a little sarcasm tucked behind every sigh. The same way you once chewed your cud while planning escape routes. You'll always carry traces of Hera's jealousy, of Zeus's disaster, of Argus's silent, watchful eyes. But now you walk forward with something heavier and somehow lighter. Your own story. And that's the thing Hera never understood. Jealousy may win the moment, but stories, they win the centuries. You wake in the night sometimes, heart-pounding sweat cooling against your neck. The dreams aren't always clear. Sometimes it's Argus, his eyes blinking out one by one like snuffed candles. Sometimes it's the gadfly, enormous now, with wings like parchment, and Hera's face grinning through its buzzing. Sometimes you're just alone, lost in a forest that smells like incense and stormwater still mooing for help. But each time you wake, and each time you remind yourself you're no longer a cow. The scar where the rope rubbed your neck is gone. The hooves long since vanished. But memory has a strange persistence, and you carry the shape of your suffering the way others carry tattoos or regrets, silent but vivid. So you do what survivors do, you tell the story, not directly, not like a bard spinning epics in the courtyard. No, you tell it in quieter ways. You hire artisans to etch scenes into ivory panels, vague, symbolic. A girl, a cow, a watchful sky. You commission temple hymns that speak not of Hera, not even of Zeus, but of a nameless woman who crossed the world and lived. And slowly the people begin to guess. Io, they whisper. She came from the gods, but she stayed with us. And in that retelling, you're not just a victim anymore. You're a teacher, and it turns out there's a lot to teach. Like what jealousy looks like when it's dressed in robes and armed with divine authority. Or how silence can be more powerful than thunder. Or why it's sometimes better to walk away than win. Your court becomes a strange kind of sanctuary. Women especially come to you not just queens, but wanderers, dancers, midwives. Women who've been dismissed, disbelieved, disfigured by the stories of others. You listen. You nod. You don't offer miracles, but you do offer truth. One day, an old Greek poet visits, invited by your son's tutors. He's here to collect myths, he says. To preserve the truths of the old world, he insists with a theatrical bow. You don't correct him. But later, when he asks if he can record your tale, the whole thing, he says, from priestess to cow to queen, you decline. Instead, you hand him a single line carved into wood. I walked across the world and never once looked back. He scribbles it down, frowning. It's not very poetic, he mutters. That's because it's real, you reply. He never publishes it, which is fine. The best lines live longer when they're forgotten by the loud ones. Now let's talk about something odd, Io's legacy in maps. You never set out to leave a trail. But the ancient world remembered your hooves better than your face. The Ionian Sea named for your crossing. Bosphorus from Bous cow and Phoros carrying, or passage literally cow ford. There's even a rumor among sailors of a constellation named for you, though scholars still argue if that's real or wishful astronomy. Quirky detail. In some versions of your myth, they claim you were chased all the way to the Horn of Africa, where your tears became a salty spring. You like that one? Melodramatic, sure, but poetic. And then there's the fringe theory, the really odd one. Some mystics believe you weren't just a victim of divine squabbling, but a conduit. That your transformation was a kind of initiation. That becoming a cow unlocked something ancient primal. That your suffering thinned the veil between mortals and gods. Wild, yes. But when you look at the stars, you sometimes wonder, maybe there's more truth in weirdness than logic. Because let's face it, nothing about your life has followed rules. Certainly not the rules of Olympus, where love is conquest and apology is optional. Not the rules of priesthood, which never prepared you for divine attention of this bovine nature. And definitely not the rules of geography, which you stomped across without even realizing you were rewriting them. No, your life has been one long contradiction. And maybe that's why it still matters. Not because you were perfect. Not because you were wise, but because you kept going. Even when you were shaped into something unrecognizable. Even when no one believed you had a voice. Especially then, you touch your own throat sometimes. Not out of fear, out of wonder. That you can speak again. That your words carry weight now. And you use them carefully. You've earned that. The days are longer now. The Nile flows slower, as if even the river is listening to your story. You move through your palace like a woman who has seen too much and survived more than she admits. The servants step softly. The priests bow just a little deeper than protocol requires. No one says why, but you know. You've become a kind of living myth. A figure both too mortal to be divine and too divine to be fully mortal. And your legend, it's everywhere. A child in the market sings a rhyme that ends with, "Don't chase clouds like Io." A muralist in the temple of Isis paints a cow-headed woman striding across starlit waves. You catch glimpses of yourself in every corner of the city, refracted and reimagined. Sometimes it's funny. Other times you feel like you're living inside a story someone else is telling about you. But that's what myths do. They multiply. They mistranslate. They stitch new meanings onto old wounds. You watch them do it to others too. Your son Epiphus is nearly grown now. He walks with that youthful mix of arrogance and uncertainty. People say he's touched by gods, that his very shadow glows. He rolls his eyes at such things, but you see the weight settling on his shoulders. You want to shield him, but you remember what Prometheus told you: your descendants will be great. And great things never come easy. He asks about Zeus once. Just once. You're quiet for a long time. Then you say, he gave you life. And then he left. That's all you need to know. Epiphus nods. He never asks again. But he watches the sky more often after that. Meanwhile, your advisors begin murmuring about Egypt's place in the larger world. Trade with Greece. Tensions with Libya. Priests bickering about rituals that predate even your reign. You try to care, but your thoughts drift, because lately you've been wondering about Argos. It's strange, isn't it? That the place where you were once a priestess, clean, respected, untouched, is now just a shadow on your map. You left it behind in a blur of hoofbeats and divine panic and never looked back. But the past has a way of echoing. Word reaches you that a new temple has been erected there. To Hera, of course. But tucked into one of the corners is a strange little fresco. A white cow, its eyes oddly human, gazing out across a painted sea. The artist is anonymous. The dedication vague. But you understand it. Someone remembers. That matters more than you expected. You begin to consider something wild. Something you've never done. Forgiveness. Not for Hera, not even for Zeus. For yourself, you forgive the girl who trusted the wrong god. The cow who stumbled through unfamiliar cities. The woman who let fear guide her footsteps for too long. You forgive all those versions of you who didn't know yet how strong you were becoming. And that changes everything. You begin to feel lighter. There's a ritual at the next full moon. Something old, something obscure, meant to honor the celestial journey of the soul. You agree to lead it draped in white linen, a gold diadem glinting softly in your hair. The courtyard is full torches flickering like stars trying to whisper. You speak not as a queen or a goddess, or even as a legend. You speak as Io. You tell a story, your story, not as tragedy, but as transformation. You describe the confusion of the change, the loneliness of being silenced, the long walk across the world with nothing but a fly and a prayer. You don't mention Zeus. You don't mention Hera. You mention Argus, though. You thank him. The crowd doesn't understand why. But some things are better left between souls. Afterward, people come forward, some crying, some silent. One woman places a bundle of herbs at your feet and says, "For your road." You nod, because even now you feel like you're still walking, still becoming. And you know what? You wouldn't change a step. You step away from this crowd long after the last torch has been extinguished. The stone beneath your feet still radiates the warmth of the day, and for a moment the silence feels sacred. Not empty sacred, like a pause in a melody, like the space between thunderclaps. The stars are brilliant tonight, almost smug in their clarity. You wonder which one is yours. They say the gods placed Callisto among them, that Orion watches from the winter sky. You tilt your head searching. Somewhere up there, the stories go, is Io, or maybe Isis, or maybe someone whose name no longer matters. Scholars debate it. They argue over whether you were immortalized in the heavens or merely remembered in ink and stone. But they never ask the more important question. Do you want to be remembered? You think about it more than you admit. Immortality is tricky. The gods have it, and it hasn't done them any favors. Hera is still bitter. Zeus is still restless. Apollo still plays his lyre like he's the only one who hears it. But mortals, you've seen them carve meaning from moments. You've seen how one gesture, a look, a word, a step across a river can ripple for centuries. And you somehow became part of that ripple. You didn't set out to change anything. You were just a girl who swept a temple, who prayed earnestly, who found herself caught in the wake of divine attention. But now you are a mirror that myth looks into and finds itself reshaped. Let's talk about the scholars for a moment. The ones yet to come. They'll pore over tablets and scrolls debating whether Io was a real woman or just an allegory. They'll wonder if your journey was meant to symbolize the moon's path across the sky, or the migration of early cattle cults, or the psychological trauma of transformation. You chuckle, because it's all true, and also none of it is. That's how myths work. They carry truths too slippery for history. They don't pin things down, they breathe. And you've become one of their lungs. There's another temple being built in your honor. This one near the river delta, where reeds sway like dancers and crocodiles blink lazily in the sun. You visit it unannounced. The workers are startled, then delighted. One offers you a fresh fig. You accept it with a smile. The temple is modest. Columns still unfinished. The altar a simple slab of limestone. But at its center is a mosaic in progress, a woman half-cow, half-radiant queen, stepping across waves under the watch of 100 eyes. You pause before it. For the first time in a long time, you feel seen, not worshipped, not flattered, just seen. You take a stone from your satchel and place it at the base of the altar. Not for luck, not for ceremony, just as a mark. A moment. Later, one of the priests will say it was a relic, a symbol, a divine act. But for now, it's just you placing a stone to say I was here. Back in your palace, your son greets you with the casual love of someone who doesn't need myths to respect you. He's taller now, his shoulders more square. He reminds you of your father, of the olive groves of Argos, of the life before Zeus ever darkened your doorstep. You tell him stories sometimes, real ones, not always yours, about the Nile flood cycles, about constellations and flood omens, about how to tell if a peacock is watching you answer, it always is. You skip the parts with gods most nights. There will be time for that later. But you do tell him one truth, that survival is not about strength. It's about persistence. He nods. He's been listening all along. And now you sit at the edge of the veranda, watching the moon pull the river like a long breath in the night. Once you were chased by a fly, now the air around you hums with peace. Once you were a cow, now you are a mother, a monarch, a myth. And somehow you've made peace with all of it. The rhythm of life settles into something almost normal. If normal is a word that means anything anymore. The days unfold like scrolls, papyrus rustling in the hands of scribes, sun lighting up the sandstone courtyard tiles, doves fluttering from pillar to pillar. You sip date wine, nod through council meetings, and once in a while you find yourself humming without realizing it. You don't remember the tune, only that it came from somewhere far away, maybe Argos, maybe Olympus, maybe a dream. And still your mind returns to Prometheus. You haven't heard his voice in ages. Not since that night by the Bosphorus when he spoke to you in a vision bound to a cliff, bleeding divinity like oil from a cracked jug. But his words cling to your ribs, your suffering will shape empires. You didn't believe it then. Now you do. And because you do, you begin asking questions. You summon foreign traders from the north, those who've crossed into Scythian lands, those who've seen the Caucasus Mountains. You ask casually over feasts and under moonlight whether they've ever heard of a chained man screaming into the wind. Most say no. One or two go pale. One insists it's just a legend meant to scare young warriors into staying close to home. But you know better, so you begin to draw maps. Not for soldiers, not for conquest, for memory. Each dot is a place your hooves once touched. Each line a path of pain. And at the very edge, past the mouth of the Black Sea, past the peaks of snow and silence, you mark a tiny symbol, your private reminder. He's still there, and he's still waiting. Prometheus is many things, firebringer, god, challenger, eternal prisoner. But in your eyes, he is also your witness. The only one who saw you for who you were, even in the worst shape of your life. You want to repay that, but how does a mortal repay a titan? You begin with stories. You commission a series of engravings, small ones meant to be copied. They show a woman's journey from temple to pasture, from cow to queen. They mention no names. They don't need to. You ask that the final panel always be the same, a figure in chains, smiling as the stars begin to turn. The engravings are copied, carried, whispered into new regions. In some places, they think the woman was a storm goddess. In others, a cursed oracle. One version claims you were the Nile itself, running from the sea to find your form. You laugh when you hear that one. Not because it's wrong, but because somehow it isn't. Your court grows quiet with age. Not somber, just softer. The musicians play slower. The torches last longer. Your steps echo more deeply in the halls. And Epiphus, he's nearly ready. He stands on balconies now, arms folded, asking questions like, what makes a kingdom endure? And what if the gods come back? You don't have answers, but you tell him the truth anyway. That fear makes gods powerful, but stories make them remembered. He thinks on that, says nothing. You're proud of him for that. He begins building alliances with nearby cities. You watch him speak with the confidence of a king and the restraint of a farmer. He knows the land. He respects it. You couldn't have asked for more. And then one day, just like that, you realize something. You are no longer the center of the story. And that's okay, because your role has changed. You are now the root, not the blossom. The origin, not the headline. Which brings us back to Prometheus. Sometimes at night you still hear his voice. Not in dreams, in memory. Echoed in your bones. You wonder if he still hopes, if he still believes, if he's still counting the days by the number of times the eagle returns to his liver. You hope he's found a rhythm, because even chains become familiar with time. You walk the garden paths more slowly now. You've planted fig trees and pomegranate bushes and even a small olive grove, though olives still make you laugh. Somewhere in there is the first vine you planted after arriving. It's heavy with fruit now. That feels important. You pluck one, bite into it. Sweet. And for a moment you remember being chased. Then you remember stopping. Then you remember speaking. You savor the taste, the stillness, the silence that no longer feels like punishment. Prometheus, wherever he is, would be proud, because this tiny moment of peace is the truest rebellion against gods who wanted only chaos. The seasons begin to fold into one another like soft linen. The wind from the desert no longer feels sharp. It carries warmth, sometimes the scent of distant sandalwood. You find yourself rising later in the mornings, not from laziness, but from a subtle trust in the day. Nothing will chase you now, not gods, not monsters, not memories, and yet you still look over your shoulder sometimes. not in fear, more like habit, like a muscle remembering an old rhythm. You walk through the halls with your hands behind your back, fingertips brushing your robe. The murals on the palace walls seem more vivid than ever. They show you human cow human again. In one you're giving a flower to a lion. In another you're sleeping in the crook of a tree as the stars wheel overhead. You pause at one panel unfinished. It shows you crossing the sea on hooves of fire. The artist asks if he should paint Hera in the clouds, scowling. You say no, she's had enough screen time. Let's talk about her for a moment, though. Because lately the priests have been including her name more often during offerings. To Hera, guardian of unions. To Hera, protector of loyalty. You raise an eyebrow. Interesting phrasing. You know why they do it. They want balance, they want harmony, and part of you doesn't blame them. Hera is, after all, still watching, still listening. Olympus may be far, but Olympus never really leaves the room. And that's the complicated thing. Hera wasn't always cruel, not in every myth. Some stories say she helped midwives, protected women in labor, whispered to brides on their wedding nights. Others say she invented the pomegranate as a symbol of union, of commitment. Of course, others claim she flung it at Zeus's head during an argument. Historians still argue whether her image softened over time, or if people just got better at flattering her. You wonder sometimes if she was jealous of you personally, or just of what you represented. A mortal who, despite everything, was seen, loved, escaped. Hera could endure Zeus's flings with nymphs, but the idea of a mortal woman becoming important, that was something else entirely. And maybe, just maybe, she saw a little of herself in you. Or maybe she just hated cows. That's also possible. You attend a festival one evening, one celebrating your own myth. The musicians play a melody that mimics hooves galloping. Children wear little horned headdresses made of papyrus. They chase one another laughing, pretending to be you. You smile, but it catches in your throat, because it's adorable and deeply strange. Imagine being chased across continents, and centuries later, it becomes a game. But that's how myth works. It sands down the horror, polishes it into something tolerable, even beautiful. Your suffering becomes a costume, a story to fall asleep to, and yet you allow it. You even bless it. Because the story once passed on is no longer yours alone. And maybe that's the most merciful thing time can offer: distance. You leave the festival early. The torches flicker behind you. The sound of flutes fades into the hush of cicadas. In your chambers a scroll awaits. From Delphi. A priestess there writes to tell you that your name is now inscribed in their oracular texts, not as a warning, but as a guide. Io, the Pathwalker, they call you. A symbol of divine transition, of becoming. You trace the letters with your thumb. The girl who once trembled beneath a marble archway at Hera's temple could never have imagined this. And that more than anything makes you ache. Not because you want to go back, but because you wish you could whisper to that younger you just once. You will not always be running. You will find a voice again. You will stop being a metaphor and become a person. And then, more than a person, a pattern. Your hand rests on your chest. Your breath deepens. There are still questions you've never answered. What exactly turned you back? Was it Zeus's power, your own voice, a moment of mercy from Hera, or just exhaustion from the gods themselves? You don't know, and strangely you no longer need to. What matters is that you're here. What matters is that you made it, not untouched, but whole. Morning comes in silence, broken only by the gentle brushing of brooms across stone and the faint chirp of ibis on the riverbank. You rise before the sun today, not because you must, but because something in the air calls for stillness. You wrap yourself in linen the color of ash and honey. You eat a fig. You step barefoot into the courtyard where the dew still clings to the floor. The land remembers you here. The reeds lean just slightly as you pass, like they're bowing without meaning to. You're not sure when exactly the world began treating you like a relic, a sacred thing, something to be walked around rather than walked with. It doesn't bother you, you understand. There's a quiet power in becoming a symbol, especially when it wasn't your goal. But it does make you thoughtful. You pass the temple, where scribes are carefully copying stories into fresh papyrus. Their ink is made from crushed soot and wine, their hands steady, their eyes tired. You pause to read a fragment, and Io, sacred wanderer, fled across sky and sea, her cries becoming rivers, her hooves tracing the map of sorrow. You don't correct it. It's not entirely wrong, just poetic. And then there's a new part, something you've never heard before. And it was said that when her tears fell into the mouth of the Nile, the river knew her name and whispered it to the reeds each spring. You feel the pull of that image your grief translated into geography. It's flattering, a little dramatic, but still beautiful. And in a way it captures something you hadn't put into words. The idea that your pain didn't just evaporate, it fed the world. You think of Prometheus again, not as a god, as a friend, because that's what he became, even chained to a rock. The only being in the cosmos who saw you not as a prize or a mistake or a pawn, but as someone who could endure. You remember his promise that your descendants would matter, and now you see it every day. In Epiphase's calm decisions, in the way temple priests consult your opinion before invoking the old gods, in how women stand taller in your presence. You have become something permanent, not untouchable, just undeniable, and yet part of you still feels that flicker of animal instinct, that urge to move, to wander, to flee even when no one is chasing. You tame it mostly, but sometimes in the quiet it resurfaces, so you begin walking the city's edge again, not like a queen surveying her land, more like a ghost checking its old haunts. You visit the fig tree where you once prayed to forget everything. You stop at the river bend, where a boy mistook you for a goddess and offered you a clay bowl of water. You sit under the acacia grove, where you once wept alone for what you'd lost, and found no one to witness it. You sit there again. This time you're not alone. A little girl from a market appears barefoot holding a flower. She doesn't know your name. She doesn't care. She sees a woman sitting quietly and decides that's enough reason to join her. You smile. She braids a blade of grass and offers it to you like a scepter. You take it with all the dignity in the world. This is your inheritance now. Not thrones or temples, but quiet moments with people who don't know your story and love you anyway. And as the girl skips off, probably inventing a tale of her own, you lean back and let the sun soak your skin. You realize something in that moment. You are no longer running. You are not hiding. You are not changing. You are simply here, living, breathing, existing without apology. And in the distance, you swear you hear a laugh, low, rumbling, familiar. Prometheus. Wherever he is, you hope he feels it too. The miracle of endurance, the gift of stillness. You don't know how long you sit beneath that acacia tree. Time softens when no one demands it from you. The birds pass overhead in lazy spirals, and the wind moves through the leaves like it's trying not to wake you. You close your eyes for a while. Not because you're tired, because you can. Once there was no safety in closing your eyes. Only stinging flies and watchful gods and footsteps behind you that weren't your own. Now here in the hush of your city, you rest. You trust the ground, not to vanish beneath you. But let's not pretend the gods are done with you. They rarely leave anyone alone for long. You hear whispers from the north. A new priesthood gaining influence in Thebes, claiming to receive visions from Hera herself. That's right, Hera. Still playing her games. Still elbowing her way back into the spotlight. You sit in council chambers as your scribes read the news aloud. They say this new order teaches that Io was a cautionary tale, not of survival, but of punishment. That her suffering was just. That the cow form was a divine mercy to keep her humble. You raise one eyebrow. You say nothing for a long time. Then calmly, you request that the scribes stop reading, and that a few additional offerings be sent to the temples of Isis and Hathor. More songs, more inscriptions, more your story. You're not fighting Hera. You're simply correcting the record, because you know how easily myths twist when left alone. How often pain gets rebranded as justice. How survival gets painted as shame. Not this time. You host an open gathering on the solstice music food storytelling. People come from across the region. Dancers reenact your journey through flame and dust. Children laugh and clap when the fly character enters buzzing obnoxiously. Someone even dressed a goat in white paint to play you. It's deeply inaccurate and hilarious. You pretend to be offended. Afterward, by firelight, you tell them the real version, softly, no embellishments. You tell them about fear, about loss of voice, about becoming something else just to stay alive. You tell them how long it took to forgive yourself for not being stronger sooner. They listen. One woman older than you, with eyes like cracked marble, reaches for your hand. I thought I was the only one, she whispers. You shake your head. None of us are. And just like that, Hera loses this round. But you're not petty about it. Because you understand now, Hera's legacy isn't about cruelty. It's about control. About holding a narrative in place so tightly that no one questions it. Until someone does. And that someone was you. Now you walk through the palace gardens at night with a new ease. The guards nod less formally. The priests begin referring to you not as Queen Io, but as Mother of Becoming. You like that. It fits. Your son Epiphus asks you one evening what he should do if the gods try to pull him into their drama. You smile. Tell them no. But what if they don't listen? You look him in the eyes. Then walk. And he understands. Not just the word. The weight of it. You taught him that without meaning to, just by surviving. Later you look up at the stars again, and for the first time you don't wonder if one of them is yours. You know all of them are borrowed. Because myths don't belong to individuals. They belong to the ones who carry them, whisper them, question them, outgrow them. You lay down in your chamber, the stone cool beneath your palms, and just before sleep takes you a final thought, settles gently in your mind. Hera made you a cow, but you made yourself a legend. The years pass with the unhurried grace of a procession ceremonial measured slightly surreal. You no longer count the seasons in floods or festivals, but in the faces of those who come to hear your story and the ones who tell their own in return. It's become a tradition now. Once a year on the night of your transformation, when the moon is exactly half lit, you speak beneath the temple colonnade. Not to recount pain, not to dramatize the past, but to remind everyone quietly that myths don't have to end in tragedy. This year, the courtyard is full. Merchants and musicians, scholars and servants, young mothers cradling fussy infants and children who have already memorized your story better than any scroll. Some have traveled days just to hear the woman who once outran Olympus. You stand before them not as royalty, but as witness, and you say the same phrase each year, the one that opens the telling. I was not the first to run. I was not the last to speak. The crowd settles. Lanterns flicker. And you begin again, weaving the tale of a priestess who became a cow, who wandered too far, who suffered too much, who survived anyway. And then something different. You talk about what came after. The awkwardness of speaking again. The shame of being celebrated for something you didn't choose. The strange, soft guilt of joy after so much sorrow. The room listens like it's never heard silence before. And in that stillness, something shifts. You've felt it building for years, but now it becomes clear you are no longer just the one who was chased. You are the pause that follows the chase. You are the moment when a person catches their breath and realizes they're still alive. Later, back in your chambers, you light a single oil lamp and unwrap a package delivered from far away. Inside is a small bronze figurine. A cow, yes, but with a human face, smiling slightly, standing firmly on 4 legs. There's a message tied around its neck. It reads, "For Io, who taught me that suffering doesn't erase personhood." No signature, no name. You run your fingers over the figurine's surface. It's rough, made by a hand that knew pain. That's how you know it's real. You place it beside your bed, next to the olive wood bowl you carved in your silent years. And for a moment, you imagine every woman who ever bent under Hera's gaze. Every nymph who changed form to escape. Every girl who swallowed her own voice because Olympus was listening. You hope they're free now, and you whisper into the dark. You weren't wrong. You were just rewritten. The next morning, a messenger arrives. He brings news from the north. Prometheus is free. You stare at the scroll. Blink. Read it again. You'd almost stopped hoping. Almost. The scroll is vague. It says the chains were shattered by a great hero, a descendant of your bloodline. A lion-wearing, club-swinging mortal who defied Olympus and lived. You smile slowly, deeply. You sit down and pour a cup of water. Not wine, just water. Something simple, something real. You drink to Prometheus, to Heracles, to the long, strange, broken road between you. And for the first time in what feels like eternity, you laugh. It's not loud. It doesn't echo. But it's whole. It begins with rain. Not the heavy flooding kind that makes villagers panic and priests grab at their omens. Just a soft, honest drizzle, the kind that tastes like newness on your tongue. You're standing beneath an awning, watching droplets form perfect beads along the edge of the stone when it finally settles in your chest. You've come full circle, not to Argos, not even to Olympus, but to yourself. For so long you were defined by your shape, girl, cowgirl again. But now no title quite fits. You are not only queen, not just priestess, not goddess or ghost or animal. You are Io, and everyone knows what that means. The children still ask you, wide-eyed and breathless, what it felt like to be a cow. Did you dream like a person? Did grass taste good? Could you still pray? You always answer truthfully, even when it's strange, especially when it's strange. Yes, I dreamed, you say. And no, the grass never stopped tasting like exile. They don't understand. But that's fine. One day they'll reread your myth and feel the weight behind your words. A few of them already do. In the quieter years, you've begun writing not with ink, but through rituals, through gestures. You teach silence as a kind of power, stillness as a form of protest, endurance as a philosophy. And though you never name it, everyone understands you are shaping something that will outlast stories. One evening you walk alone down to the Nile, the same path you've walked hundreds of times. But this time there's no retinue, no flute music, no diplomatic excuse. Just you and the river and the stars scattered above like loose pearls from a forgotten crown. You kneel at the water's edge. Touch the surface with both hands. Feel the current move around your fingers like it knows your name. You whisper, thank you. To the gods, maybe. To the world. Perhaps. To yourself, certainly, you stand. And then, in a gesture no one sees but the sky, you toss a small bundle into the river. Wrapped in linen, tied with reed. Inside a stone from the Caucasus, a carved wooden eye and a single white cowbell. Let the river carry it wherever it pleases. You walk back slowly, pausing often, savoring the rhythm of your bare feet against the earth. You are no longer the girl who ran. You are no longer the woman who looked back. You are the myth who endured. And in your final act of quiet rebellion, you stop telling the story altogether. Others will tell it now. They'll get it wrong, of course. They'll turn you into a star, a goddess, a footnote. They'll argue about your meaning. They'll name seas and straits and maybe even comets after you. But you'll be busy living, because somewhere in a village far downstream, a child you've never met is carving a cow into soft clay and whispering your name, not in fear, not in awe, but in recognition. That's enough. That's more than enough. Wind down 300 words, and now the journey ends not in thunder or transformation, but in stillness. You've seen it all, haven't you? From the cold marble temples of Argos to the soft rush of the Nile, from the crackling skies of Olympus to the dust-choked trails of exile, from silence to speech, from cow to queen, from object to author. You've met gods and monsters and everything in between. And through it all, you kept moving, hooves pounding heart, straining voice, waiting. And finally, you stopped running. Now, as the night deepens and the stars settle in their ancient rhythms, you feel the weight of the story ease away. Like old linen being folded, like a braid being undone. Let your body grow heavy now. Let the tension in your shoulders melt into the ground. Let your breath slow, as soft as Nile mist before dawn. You're safe here. No flies, no gods, no curses, only sleep. And if you dream tonight, maybe it'll be of fig trees and calm waters, of the quiet smile of a chained titan, of a cow's bell echoing over reeds, of the sound of your own name spoken not in fear but in peace. Let it drift. Let it fade. You've walked the world and returned to yourself. There is nothing more to chase. There is only now. Sleep well, Mythwalker.